Hey everybody, welcome back to the Sonic Chronicle. My name is Owen and today we are doing a full review, a track by track review, as I tend to do when I do these full album reviews, of Megadeth's 2026 album, Megadeth. For those who are unaware, Megadeth is an American thrash metal band formed in LA in 1983 by vocalist and guitarist Dave Mustaine. Typically, Megadeth is known as one of the big four of American thrash metal bands, along with Slayer, Anthrax, and, of course, Metallica. I think everyone knows the story, though, that Dave Mustaine helped to found Metallica, wrote some of their songs on their debut EP and album Kill 'Em All, before being fired for excessive drinking, drug use, and generally just being a horrible bandmate. He then formed Megadeth to make his own thrash band, to really show him how it's done. And some even say that Megadeth was named that so that they would appear before Metallica on record store shelves, when record stores were more widespread at least. I actually saw Megadeth way back in 2007 at the Donington Download Festival. I was aware of their music, particularly the big hits along with Peace Cells and Rust in Peace. I sat on a hill, hungover, pumping myself full of Pepsi to keep myself sustained, to get the best view and the best sound. I was very pleasantly surprised by how humble and respectful Mustaine was to the crowd, and even to his bandmates. It wasn't really what I'd expected at the time, given how he had come across in interviews and guitar magazines. Though I had some respect for him as well, particularly for relearning the guitar after he'd caused himself nerve damage in his arm. Overall though, Megadeth to me are a little bit of a meme. Mustaine's vocals have never been particularly good, come across as highly synthetic, his lyrics equally if not more so. A tout le monde and his pidgin French really comes to mind in that regard. But you can't say the same about his skill in his lead playing, or the impact that Megadeth as a band have had on metal generally. I discovered Marty Friedman through his work with Megadeth, and he is still what I would consider to be one of the most talented musical lead guitarists out there. Hell, I really respect them in spite of themselves so much that I have the acoustic guitar made for Megadeth because of how much that they toured. If you haven't seen that video, go and check that one out. And now they have recorded their final album, the self-titled Megadeth. Dave has been doing the rounds, being interviewed by anyone that'll listen, and he really seems to be at a point in his life where he wants to rebuild the bridges that he had burnt away over the years. He's spoken very kindly about all of the members of Metallica, even going so far as to praise Lars' songwriting, though he did stop short of praising his drumming. He pitched the idea of touring together, though I do think that might be a rebuilt bridge too far. But regardless of that, it is refreshing to see as we head into having a listen and reviewing the new album simply titled Megadeth. Before we do get into the review proper though, please do consider hitting the like button on this video if you like what I do generally. Please do consider subscribing to the channel so that you get these kinds of videos and more dropped directly into your subscriber feed. And of course, leave me comments in the comments section if there's anything that we talk about over the course of this video that you agree with, that you disagree with, that you'd like to know more about, that you think I should do less of. Leave it in the comments. I always love to see it. And with that said and done and out of the way, let's talk about the album. Track 1, Tipping Point. Starts out with a very cool, bouncy riff, an 80s style tom beat with accentuated bass notes playing underneath, a lovely legato section after the drums kick in properly, onto a classic thrash riff before the vocals start. Mustaine actually sounds pretty good on this track. Pretty authentic, rather than the often caricatured metal voice that he's used on the classic songs Megadeth are known for, like Symphony of Destruction, Hangar 18, Sweating Bullets, etc. The chorus riffs continue this intensity through, though the vocals are a bit weaker, and the post-chorus, we get the first guitar solo before verse 2. Then another chorus, another solo post-chorus 2, all very flashy legato heavy solos, but this one has a nice bit of whammy play in there too, all very characteristic of 80s metal. The middle section sounds like it's played maybe in a little bit of a more major scale. While it has the impartiality of power chords underneath, there does sound like there's a seventh or so in there underneath to add that little bit of flavour to the chords that are played. It turns out that is also just the outro. The song kind of just peters out in the end. Track 2, I Don't Care. This second track starts out like it's Maria by Green Day, a big bass and drum intro. This is the Mustaine that I know from a lyrical and vocal perspective. limp, ineffectual rebellion that again comes across as massively inauthentic. It's like these are the things that he was told to include in lyrics for a metal song at some point and held onto that for 40 plus years. The second verse is slightly more interesting musically. Guitars are relegated to accentuating the drums, which is cool, and not something that I'd typically expect from someone like Mustaine. Then into a slick guitar solo with a near guitar part underneath, a neat guitar part underneath, shall I say, playing with some open notes to pedal between neat hammer-ons and down the neck, up and down the neck. Very clever stuff. Then it changes again to a pan-muted riff to accommodate the quick playing in a new key before it changes again within 20 seconds to another riff and a replay of verse 2. All wrapped up within 3 minutes. This is all happening at a breakneck pace, frankly. Track 3, Hey God. This is back to that memory that I was talking about in the intro. It's a little bit too, are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. Look, I get he's getting older, and he has fewer days remaining than more. But there's a way to write this in a more elegant way. It's a reflective song in a lot of ways about burnt bridges and whatever he has to show for it. But something that I do like here is the drumming and the drum tones, particularly in the verses. It doesn't sound heavily 80s, but it is rooted firmly within that tradition. The guitars also shine within the verses, and you have the pan-muted riffage, but there's also almost clean-sounding, heavily reverbed, glassy-sounding parts for additional texture. It's those things that really elevate this beyond the lyrical content, and that's what is actually a really fun, great song. Again, clocking in at 3 minutes 28. It's not self-indulgent. There's a lot to be said for that. Track 4. Can't believe I'm saying this. Let There Be Shred. Speaking of self-indulgent, this is Let There Be Shred. Very much a riff that you could imagine him bringing to practice with Metallica in the 80s. It's less tasteful than the tracks so far, which is an achievement, and the lyrics may be the most eye-opening yet. The day I was born, a guitar in my head, a guitar in my hand, the earth started rumbling upon this command, smash my guitar and let there be shred. Straight into a guitar solo. That would have been cool to me if I was about 15 years old or so, blowing fretboards away at the speed of light. I was typing this live as I listened to it, and that was a lyric that came up immediately. It's nonsense, you know, but again, the musicality is there. The lead sections are more blisteringly fast, playing when required. Halftime, as the middle section is when it needs to be, keeps things varied, interesting, and pique the interest every time. So it's those things that really kind of set you off. Overall, I found that the track had an element of The Devil Went Down to Georgia about it, almost like a challenge that has been called and answered through music. Track 5 is Puppet Parade. The opening here sounds like there are strings being pulled for sure, a takedown of political corruption from the perspective of the corrupted with an element of conscience. The second time that I felt Mustaine's vocals have been authentic, and I appreciate that. The music sits in the background, almost like they've considered this song to be too important to let the message be overshadowed. I'd interpret this as a takedown of politicians and the American system that allows politicians to be bought and sold generally. It's in keeping, I think, with Mustaine's beliefs, you know, both politically and spiritually. Though that might be a generous interpretation. But again, the vocals play out over the top of some amazing lead work, which sits quite a bit lower in the mix. And that must surely be a conscious decision here. Then the proper solo kicks in, not particularly brash, not particularly long before the middle section vocals play out. In some ways not dissimilar to a section from a Tool song. It's very cool. Change the guitar tones and it wouldn't be too far out of place on Fear Inoculum. And then we get the proper solo, which again goes some interesting places over the top of the riffs. Important to note that there haven't been as many riffs as can humanly fit on the track on this one. Track 6, Another Bad Day. Cool opening, heavy delay guitar part before kicking into a riff that really reminds me of You've Got Another Thing Coming by Judas Priest. Really sinister sounding throughout, while keeping that 80s kind of sound profile. It does that so well, that blend and balance between 80s and that modern sinister sound so much that, you know, I could really imagine that being the inspiration of a new Ghost album. The solo again leans into the theme here, goes into some classical places. And similar to before, there's excellent guitar work that is, I don't want to say buried, but it's certainly lower in the mix than I think it should be. Track 7, Made to Kill. Another big tom-heavy drum intro. A really nice change of pace at times, considering most of the tracks lead with the guitar. This one goes with the drums. Lovely stuff. The riff that kicks in, feels a little bit like a Metallica song from somewhere between Load and Death Magnetic, but if Saint Anger had never happened. Continues through the verse and then into a thrash riff that almost has a punk tinge to it for the choruses. A bit light in terms of guitar tone, but the lyrical content is quite dark. Makes for a strange juxtaposition. Maybe it's because of the riff not pedaling on the E, or maybe I've become too used to down-tuned guitars, but it does seem to lack a darkness to it, but it doesn't lack for oomph. Track 8, Obey the Call. Starts out giving me the vibe that this is going to be a bit of a ballad, and it kind of follows up on it. Nicely clean guitars, high quality bends and vibrato that you can hear scraping the frets. The main guitar riff is generic enough, fades into the background a bit to allow the vocals and the lyrical content to take their place, which isn't a bad call. This is a fairly strong vocal performance from Mustaine. Again, authentic and frail in parts that accentuates the themes, though there are still some cringy lyrics, as is the norm. Then, the middle section kicks in, which is a portion of the chorus riffs, and then the verse riffs. The solo gets a little classical sounding towards the end, but just as it gets interesting, peters out. A half chorus, then into the real middle section. Big toms lead the change, much faster riffing, huge solo kicks in, less of the classical, but you can clearly hear that this is almost a dueling solo that ends with a dive bomb, and it is very metal. Track 9, I Am War. The opening riff is heavily impacted here by a phaser effect. Not something I was expecting, not something you generally hear, but I probably should have, given how the 80s is all over this record. Continues on a slightly lighter setting in the verses. This one is almost a little poppy, but it's quite good. There's a darkness in there due to the evil interval that is played to great effect here in places. The middle section leading into the solo is a nicely near clean, complex sounding riff. And again, the lead part's hidden underneath until the solo truly kicks in. It's brief. It's a brief song too, coming in at under 4 minutes. Quite a good track. Quite like it. Track number 10, The Last Note. And ooh boy, if there wasn't enough cringe up to this point, this one will fill the gap. It starts out with a soliloquy by Dave Mustaine about how he must say his long goodbye. Nice arpeggios being played underneath it, mind. The riffing here is quite fast-paced, while Mustaine sings about how he's toured and written and the toll that it's taken. We're getting something a little bit biographical here. 2.5 minutes in, though, we have a classical guitar solo played on a nylon string, which is certainly a choice. It captured my attention, at least. It's very tasteful before getting back to the melodic solo that seems to have a list of techniques that it needs to get through in the allotted time. Vocally, though, I think this is Mustaine's weakest performance on the record. But there's something heartfelt about it in places. And then, bizarrely, there's another soliloquy in the outro that is a minute long, while the acoustic guitar plays underneath it. Overall, we've seen the Apology tour in advance of the album, and this track actually seems like a very fitting capstone to it. As a closer, it makes a lot of sense. But then there's track 11, Ride the Lightning. This is the one we had all heard about in advance of the album. Megadeth doing Ride the Lightning. Immediately, the tone is off. The guitar tone specifically. As someone that has loved Lightning and knows it very well, it's hard to hear something that isn't the Metallica version. It was always going to be an uphill struggle. The vocals are also wildly different. Hetfield did the vocals for Ride the Lightning when he was 20 years old. Dave Mustaine is 64 as of recording. There is no world in which that they could ever compare. That said, the middle section is just as ominous as the original, and the solo largely follows the same pattern, with a few distinct flourishes and differences unique to the players. It's an interesting experiment certainly, but not something that I would necessarily want to see done with other Metallica tracks. And that is the whole album. That is Megadeth's swan song, clocking in at 47 minutes and 8 seconds. 11 tracks in 47 minutes and 8 seconds. Not overly long. Respects your time generally. Overall, I think that it is a better record than I was expecting. It has some of the classic Megadeth cheese in there, but it's surprisingly earnest at times. If you're a fan of old school Megadeth specifically, you might find elements of what you're after. As I mentioned before, the 80s and early 90s have fingerprints all over this album. If you're new and this is your first introduction to the band, I think that it is an interesting and accessible jumping on point, funnily enough. My verdict on this is that I do think it is worth your time. You might not love it all, you might cringe, but it is unapologetically a Megadeth album, despite the apology tour leading up to the album's release. And truly, I think that I respect the album more in light of the pushing aside of the historic pettiness. And that is it, folks. That is my review of Megadeth's Megadeth. Before we wrap up, I'm just going to do what I always do. Hit the like button if you like what I do, if you like this video. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of these videos in the future, and of course leave me comments in the comment section. We've talked a lot about the album over the course of this video, and if there's anything that you liked, maybe I didn't speak about some of the tracks that you liked in as kind terms as maybe you might consider them, let me know in the comments section. Maybe there's stuff here that I've left out. Maybe I've gotten something wrong. Let me know in the comments. Always love to see it. But that is it for this video, folks. Thanks very much for stopping by and for listening to my thoughts on Megadeth's final album, for now at least. And I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.